Hey guys, late last week on my Instagram page, here if you want to follow, I did an Instagram post around about red flags related to supervisors, and I thought, hold on, there is more to add, so I decided to make a YouTube video all about it right here, right now. So there's two bonus actual red flags, depends if you want to call it a bonus, because it's not great news to figure out, but that's what we're going to be talking about today, and this is these red flags that we can identify from start of our PhD towards the middle, and even whilst we are writing, and you might be doing lab work, qualitative work, whatever it may be. Red flags are red flags, supervisors are supervisors. So no matter what your background is in research, this video will be actually quite useful for you. I hope you don't have to use it, meaning I hope you don't have red flags, but it is useful to know as a PhD student. So without further ado, let's get straight into the first red flag to be wary of. First one is all about excessive communication, and that is when a supervisor is potentially ringing you, texting you, emailing you, finding you where you are in the university consistently and excessively. Now, some supervisors have their mobile phone numbers with their students and have a dynamic with that, and that's fine. Some have just email only, some have like an open door policy in the actual office. So whatever the dynamic is, when it's then utilized excessively by the supervisor to you, that's a problem. That's something that needs to be changed, that needs to be addressed. And that's one of the first red flags to be wary of. And you might be wondering, okay, how do we raise this? You should have research support services and research team members that you can liaise via email, you can address your concerns, stress your concerns. Are they be able to look at it from a diplomatic point of view, a university point of view, and either mediate or address it to the supervisor, or find some calm solution to address that query. So whilst I'll be talking these red flags, bear in mind that there should be, especially at your university, proper channels that you can seek out and email to try and address these queries with your supervisor. But yeah, back to this excessive communication. If you see that on unsociable hours, out of hours, late nights, weekends, you're getting emails, phone calls to do this, that needs to be addressed, because it's going to get worse. So bear that in mind. Number two is unfortunately derogatory comments. Now, sometimes, you may be actually not pulling your weight. You may be being a bit lazy perhaps, or not understanding the importance of a PhD. And sometimes a firm word or just kind of a pick me up to try and motivate you back again is understandable, and sometimes we all need it, me, myself included. However, when that scenario is when a supervisor starts to actually tell you negative stuff, things that are hurting your feelings, things that are quite deep or quite personal, things that are just straight away rude. It's not motivational, it's not inspirational, it's just rude. I had this in my PhD where maybe I felt it was rude, but I didn't think it was called for. Where supervisor told me maybe it's in your best interest to do an MPhil instead. Now, if that reason was to motivate me, it worked, but it's still not a nice feeling when you're working as hard as you can. No disrespect to the MPhil field and having a master's in philosophy, but it's the notion of you're trying to get a doctorate in philosophy and it's telling you maybe you're not there or you won't be able to do it. Maybe it might be you want to step back and just finish now and move on. So although somebody might be watching this now and saying that's fine, but another person might be looking at it and say that's not a fair statement. And there's other things where people say, yeah, you're not worth it, you're not good enough, what's the point of doing this, why are you wasting my time? These are comments that should not come from a supervisor to a student, because a supervisor is there to mold and guide you, not there to not the manager, not your boss even, and even then it's not called for, but they're supposed to guide you and mold you and help you when things are going wrong, as opposed to putting you down, which is not fair. So keep an eye out on derogatory comments, and if you do see them consistently as well, you know what to do. Flag it up, address it, go seek help and support from those channels at university to try and stop this from happening, because it will affect your mental health. Affecting mine, I don't want it to affect yours. Number three is unrealistic deadlines. Now, academia can be quite tough. Doing a PhD, you'll have many things to do, many side projects and other things. But when your supervisor is instilling deadlines that are just unreachable, where you would have to work round the clock, 24 hours, work on the weekends, etc. Now, yes, I am one of the fans to say that on occasion, work on the weekend, doing the extra hours might be beneficial in the long run. but only on occasion. Not every day, not every week, not till 2 in the morning all the time. And when the supervisor doesn't care to think about how much time it would take and how it would affect your work-life balance excessively, that's something you should not allow. And yes, if there's this scholarship or this grant coming around, you only do as much as you can. And yes, I have seen as well, unfortunately, supervisors will coerce and coerce you to the point where you feel like you have no choice but to do the work. That's where you have to stand your ground to say, yes, maybe you have to do it a few extra hours, fine. But you need to address it there and then, even with the supervisor directly. You don't have to go to different channels sometimes. You can just voice it to your supervisor, say, look, on your email, hi sir, hi miss, hi whoever your supervisor is, this is now starting to affect that I have other commitments or have other things that I need to do. This is now becoming untenable. We need to address, or maybe having some students help out or other people part of the team to help this, to kind of stress, you can say, even the workload, if that's a better term. And keep that in mind, because unfortunately, if you don't address it, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And if you don't say it early enough, people will look at you saying, you should have asked me ages ago, I'm now busy now, or why didn't you ask for my help now? Or even the supervisor might say, you should have told me ages ago, I was under the impression that you're going to do this and that. So it's very, very important when, especially with unrealistic deadlines, you look at your calendar, you look at your forecast for the next few months, and mention, we need to maybe change a few things in regards to this workflow, so it is manageable for both of us, right? It's a two-way street as well. But bear in mind that unrealistic deadlines is unfortunately way too common, and it's something that needs to be addressed earlier rather than later. Now, the fourth red flag that wasn't on the Instagram post, is kind of like a bonus part now in this video, is the lack of availability. Now, supervisors, it is their responsibility, it's their right to make sure they are available for you as often as they can within reason, right? Because there's two extremes here. Sometimes students expect the supervisor to break their back and run around, etc. for them. Supervisors also are lecturers, they're academics, they're professors. They also have their other commitments. However, this red flag is about the other extreme. And that's actually all about the notion of you can't find them. You tried emailing them, you tried ringing them, you tried going to the office, and you can't pin down a meeting, you can't discuss the data. And unfortunately, I had this in the early parts of my PhD when I needed to speak to the particular supervisor whose speciality it is in this moment in time. But I couldn't pin down for like a 1 hour meeting or even half an hour meeting to go through, or maybe to get some help, because I was junior, I was a bit, not as confident as I was towards the end of my PhD. And that's why you need that support, that guidance, that help in the lab, just on occasions, to help then get you over the line to have that confidence. And even if it's about something that's gone wrong in the actual lab, you want to sit down and discuss. And sometimes supervisors don't realize that it's also a comfort to have a sit down away from the lab in a coffee shop or in another meeting room, sit down, go through the data and give some advice. And this is very important, that if you are trying a few times, for example, if you're trying, email, phone, they didn't answer, or they're busy, or they reschedule, fine. But if it's happening too often, if it's now weeks, that needs to be addressed. And sometimes you need to escalate it to their boss, escalate it to the channels, and hopefully that will try and get the supervisor's attention to realize that, hold on, yeah, I'm not pulling my weight, I'm not doing my responsibilities for the student, I need to now address. And sometimes, believe it or not, you as a student have the power. So if you address it via email, as I mentioned in previous videos and Instagram posts, the notion of emailing, so you have a thread of evidence, then supervisor needs to realize that, hold on, I want to get in big trouble here if I don't help out. And that's how you can sway things in your favor, by the use of emails. But lack of availability, if you don't let it go on too long, because then other team, when you come to like mediating it, people will be like, okay, why did you wait so long to escalate this? And yes, your response might be that I was scared, but here's where a little bit of understanding and maturity needs to come in, that although you're scared, you know that you need to address it, otherwise it's going to get worse. And last but not least, the fifth one is just plain and simple, a lack of guidance, a lack of supervisor being a supervisor. They're not showing up, they're not giving you advice, they're not guiding you, they're not sharing their thoughts, they're not making themselves available. It's kind of a culmination of all the possible red flags into one. And that's why I put it as one and at the end, because it is the last resort, it is the biggest red flag, But unfortunately, I have seen it in my lifetime during my PhD and being a postdoc that there are supervisors who unfortunately hit all of these red flags where they're being evasive, they're not sharing kind of their thoughts, they maybe have ulterior motives, they're doing, you know, other commitments as opposed to looking after you or being there for you. They are not looking at the emails properly, they're not discussing the data, they're not maybe finding other avenues for you to look into. When that's happening, it should never get to that stage, first of all. But if you feel like now you've exhausted all avenues for you to resolve it, please make sure you escalate it with a thread of evidence, write a whole report, share your concerns where I asked my supervisors to do this in reasonable time, with this, within reasonable duties, and it wasn't met here, it wasn't met here, it wasn't met here, it wasn't met here. And if you have that evidence, you know, that you texted the supervisor or you emailed and you got evidence, fine. You have to hold yourself accountable and say that, do you know what? I have a lot of actual evidence to say that my supervisor is not being a supervisor. This now needs to be addressed. And so much so that sometimes you have to change supervisors. And that's very daunting because you don't want bad blood between yourself. However, it can be at the cost of your PhD. And that's something you need to bear in mind, that if you have an untenable relationship with your supervisor and it's not addressed, you may lose the chance to finish your PhD. And sometimes if you have to change supervisor and there's a bit of bitterness, there's a bit of awkwardness, but it allows you to continue your PhD and finish, that's an opportunity that's worth looking into. Not saying you have to take it, but it's worth looking into. And again, like I said, with all these red flags, especially with this one, don't leave it too late because it may work against you, especially this one, because it'll be like, right, you had all of this evidence, but why did you not look into it? Why did you not address it earlier? Now it's sometimes a bit too late. You're maybe 3 months away from writing up and you've got all this data to collect. If you mentioned it perhaps earlier, you might have had enough time to potentially redo some experiments, redo some analysis or interviews. So anything, especially the biggest shout out from this video, is bear in mind that any red flag you see, try address it as early as possible. Don't leave it too late, please, because it's something I did, unfortunately, and I paid the price. And like I do on this YouTube channel and Instagram page, is to try avoid you making the same mistakes I did. So please bear in mind that if you see any of these signs, address it quickly. So guys, those were 5 red flags you need to watch out for in regards to your supervisor. Hopefully, as I said at the start of the video, you don't see these, but if you do, don't be shy, address it. You can say escalate it if you want to speak to somebody else as well. Make something happen to try and change the circumstance that's caused this red flag, so then you can have a more prosperous and effective, beneficial, incredible, amazing PhD journey. Better than mine, I hope. In any case, I shall see you in the next one. If you want to subscribe, you can do. Link is down here below. You can also join my newsletter. Link is in the video description. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, you can follow me on Instagram, Aamir.phd. See you soon.